Dumelang. Sanibonani. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this book reading, book discussion, book engagement, reflections. I hope you are as excited as I am to be part of this very important conversation that you're going to be having this afternoon. My name is Puleng Sekgalo, and I'm based here at UNISA. I'm in the Chief Albert Luthuli Research Chair in the College of Human Sciences, and I'm very honored to be moderating the conversation this afternoon. We are here at an event hosted by the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages, and we're going to be discussing the book, The Rainbow Nation at Crossroads Orania, Right to Self-Determination and Diplomacy, Make South Africa Great Again? We will find out. And before we can start with the engagements about the book, I would like to invite our Executive Dean, Professor Zethu Nkosi, to come and offer opening remarks. And as she comes also, I would just like to say, Prof, happy International Nursing Day. For those of you who do not know, Prof Nkosi is a professional nurse, so the caring is in the bones, is in the genes, and now she's caring for us and about us in other ways. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, please, a round of applause for Professor Nkosi.
Thank you, Program Director. Yes, I am a nurse. Other people always ask, Prof Nkosi, why are you always early in any meetings? It's because I deal with life. This is free info. If there is no oxygen for a few seconds, that person will be brain dead. That's how we're trained to be on time. I'm sure you have noticed our meetings, we start on time. Ladies and gentlemen, before I just do my opening address, may we congratulate Usingaye, Dr. Lorato Mokoena. And then this event came at the right time. Yesterday we were at OR Tambo, accompanying our colleagues. If you check her book, it's talking about Orania. And 20 families were from Orania. Ladies and gentlemen, so it's the testament of what we're about to hear. We are always grateful of Prof Sekgalo for steering the ship in terms of our engagement events. People from the University of South Africa know her face. She's good at doing what she's doing. Okay, let's give her. So, may I have this opportunity to acknowledge our person, umuntu wethu, Dr. Lorato Mokoena, who crafted this book, and she told herself to say against all odds, but let's wait for the discussion so that we hear her. Prof Derkotze, our professor in the College of Human Sciences, our celebrity, I call him a celebrity prof because he's always on TV. Thank you, Prof Derk, for raising the flag. And our colleague, Dr. Sabeka Plaki, welcome to UNISA. We've got a young academic who is groomed into, I don't want to say management position, he's groomed to higher levels. He's here, Dr. Shaku, he's from the Department of Linguistics. And then we've got Prof. Siyasanga Jali. Unfortunately, there is another engagement which is starting now at 11:30 because the Department of Linguistics falls under the School of Arts and he's the director. In his absentia, we also want to acknowledge his presence. I would love to thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, the Unisens, our friends, our external partners. We are all welcomed in this event. President Ramaphosa's signing of the expropriation bill in January 2025 resulted in various local and international shockwaves. To date, the signing of the bill has soured South Africans' relations with the United States of America, as evidenced by the current president. We know what is happening. We know. That's why I said yesterday, I accompanied our colleagues when they went to the USA. We will also welcome them back when they come back. I just wanted to be a witness to say, are they leaving? Yes. Locally, the signing of the bill has reignited racial tensions between black and whites, which is flamed by President Trump in his offer because he's getting information and he's acting without analyzing the information that is coming to his desk. And he said, African refugees need to escape South African government-sponsored race-based discrimination, including racial discrimination, property confiscation, and the rest. As we are here, we are mixed. We are a testament to say we are united. There are those challenges, but we are able to live as one. It is with these effects in mind that the Department of Linguistic and Modern Languages hosts this book reading seminar, which is titled The Rainbow Nation at Crossroads Orania, the right to self-determination and diplomacy make South Africa great again. When I got the copy of this book, I asked the author, explain to me what happened. Did you go to Orania? She said, yes, I went there. I interviewed people in Orania, but let's allow the discussion to flow so that all your questions will be answered. The seminar blends the speaker's perspective on Dr. Mokwena's recently published book titled Orania, Post-Apartheid South Africa's Boogeyman, with the speaker's own perspectives on the Rainbow Nation. This is an interdisciplinary seminar with participation from various colleagues in the College of Human Sciences, also colleagues from the Department of Linguistics, Department of Anthropology, from the School of Humanities, from the School of Arts, School of Social Sciences. We really appreciate this interdisciplinary forum. The keynote address will be given by Dr. Lorato Mokoena, then Prof. Dirk Kotze and Dr. Sabega Plaki are going to serve as speakers. It's a real interdisciplinary because she's from the School of Arts, Prof. Dirk is from the School of Social Science, both with Dr. Plaki. The seminar is moderated by our own Professor Puleng Sekgalo, who is the research chair of Chief Albert Luthuli, but she's a psychologist by profession. The seminar aims to reflect on the current state of our Rainbow Nation and to what extent the existence of places such as Orania and the right to self-determination shapes our understanding of the Rainbow Nation. This seminar is a testament of the College of Human Science slogan that states, together we can make a difference. By reflecting on such a topical issue, an issue that holds really multi-layered effects for the South African society, this seminar contributes to UNISA's goal to determine tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the event. We are looking forward to the engagement that will take place. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Prof. Nkosi. Wanted to see the 49, as they're called. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you can see we are really, the conversation and the time for this book and the engagement thereof could not have been apt. So we're really looking forward to the engagements. And without wasting more time, I'm going to ask Dr. Khanati Shaku from the Linguistic Department to come and offer us welcome remarks on behalf of the department. Please, let's give him a round of applause.
Good afternoon. We are so excited to be here today. Although some of us, we didn't visit Orania, but through the seminar, we will take our minds there. We'll be able to understand what is Orania. So to our program moderator, Prof. Sekalo, the Executive Dean of the College of Human Sciences, Professor Ngosi, the Director in the School of Arts, Prof. Jali in absentia, our keynote speaker, Dr. Mugwena, our speakers, Dr. Blackie and Prof. Kotzie, colleagues, students, friends, esteemed guests, good afternoon once more. On behalf of the Department of Linguistics and Modern Languages, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's seminar. We are honored to host such a timely and thought-provoking discussion under the theme, The Rainbow Nation at Crossroads Orania, the right to self-determination and diplomacy make South Africa great again. Indeed, this seminar is timely, as Prof. Ngosi already alluded to. The seminar could not be more timely, as it takes place during Africa Month, a period of reflection, celebration, and recommitment to our shared continental identity. Among other things, ladies and gentlemen, Africa Month reminds us of two pivotal events of our history. Firstly, this month reminds us of the Berlin Conference of 1884, when European powers convened to divide Africa amongst themselves without regard for continent's people or cultural complexities. It further reminds us of the historic 1963 signing of the Charter of the Organization of African Unity during the Addis Ababa Summit, a defining moment that signaled the beginning of formal continental solidarity and collaboration. As we gather here today, it is essential to reflect on our past, to assess our present, and shape a vision for our collective future. As a department rooted in the study of language, identity, communication, we recognize the profound role that language plays in shaping national narratives, cultural belonging, and political discourse. Today's topic invites us to reflect deeply on the complexities of self-determination, the evolving meaning of unity in diversity. And when I say unity in diversity, I was looking at the flag of our country divided. And this also speaks about the diplomatic challenges that arise in a society as richly multilingual and multicultural as ours. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree with me that the topic at hand is one of the critical, sensitive topics, however, still essential. Even though we may be at a crossroads. It is not lost of us because we have a panel of speakers with insights who are intellectually qualified to profess special knowledge. With their input, we will explore how best to navigate the way forward. In closure, let this seminar serve as a space for open dialogue, respectful engagement, and critical reflection. May it inspire us to think not only about where we are as a nation, but where we hope to go. With those words, ke a leboha.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shaku, for those welcome remarks and really giving an overview of where we are and why it is important for us to have this conversation at a time such as this. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to get into the meat of things, the heart of things. It was in 1991, and we know South Africa was going through changes. 1990 happened, Nelson Mandela came out of jail, and in 1991, a man called Karel Boshoff came up with the idea of this town that was then called Orania, or that is called Orania. And the idea was, again, born out of the unknown, the fear of the unknown, if you will, to say what's going to happen to the country, to South Africa, to us as a people, to us as Afrikaner people, in a new country that we do not know what it's going to look like. And it was about the protection of the Afrikaner heritage. It was about the protection of the linguistically as well, the language Afrikaans. And the argument was always that it's not about race, but it's about us as a people and our identity and not wanting to lose that. We do not know what's going to happen. And therefore, it's better to be proactive. And a new town, if you will, a new country, for some who say it's a country, was born. And so it is where all this begins, from a group of people fearing the unknown, if you will, but also moving forward to the rest of the country, also fearing the unknown. And this is where I think Dr. Mokwena's work becomes very important as a contribution to respond to this fear of the unknown. In one of the interviews that she had about the book, she mentioned that after one of the days when she had the interviews with people in Orania, she got home and her father asked her, "Where are you coming from?" And she said, "I'm from Orania." And just the look on her father's face said it all. The fear on the man's face. And he just walked away. He had no words. And again, that also speaks to that fear of the unknown on the other side. What is it that fear does, right? And I think what your book does is to offer us insights on facing this fear that we have. And you say that this book is about information, is about offering insights on that which we often assume, imagine, and with the book we can get a glimpse, if you will, of what Orania is, of who the people of Orania are, of what Orania looks like. And I'm hoping that we can delve deep and get into your experiences and your own reflections of the journey, but also nuggets in terms of what is it that you would like us to take with us as we read this book. And as was said, The book comes at a very important moment in our time. Prof. Nkosi mentioned earlier that with the changes that are happening in the world, with our relationship as a country with the United States, and just quickly, I want to just quote something that Max Dupré was saying when he was commenting in the Bangkok Post. He was scathing of complaints of persecution among the fellow Afrikaners, and he said, I quote, "Afrikaners are far better off materially and culturally today than they were in 1994. Afrikaner culture is thriving," he said, adding that it is the only local language, I don't know how many of us are aware of this, with 4 television channels and an array of newspapers, magazines, and festivals. And therefore, for Max Dupré, the fear of white persecution is a phantom pain. It's not about what is actually happening, but about what could happen. And I take us back to 1991. What could happen? What's going to happen after black people take over, right? And so it is this phantom, the boogeyman or tikoloshi phenomenon, as Dr. Mokoena speaks about, that the book grapples with. In the book, she asks and challenges and invites us to shift from the fear of the unknown, to ask questions and allow ourselves to be informed and not just make assumptions, which is very important as scholars. So her book is an invitation, I believe, towards this direction. So who is Dr. Mokoena? Just briefly, Dr. Lorato Mokoena is an academic and researcher that holds a PhD in linguistics. She is the sole author of the book we are here about today, Orania, Post-Apartheid South Africa's Boogeyman. She's the associate editor of Language Matters. She is a co-editor of the Routledge Handbook of Language and the Global South's. As a researcher, her publication profile includes book chapters and journal articles in various international and national peer-reviewed journals. She currently serves as a senior lecturer in the Department of Linguistics at the University of South Africa, UNISA. She's the founder of that as a Noordkapding. It is a Northern Cape thing, colloquium, an annual multidisciplinary gathering that facilitates conversations and collaborations between various stakeholders who are invested in the Northern Cape province. She is a 2022 recipient of the Community Engagement Excellence Award at the University of the Western Cape, Achievers Awards as well. The University of the Western Cape's Achievers Award for her work in community engagement. Additionally, Lorato is the Quote This Woman Plus Voices of the Year winner in the Rural Women category for the year 2022. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lorato Mokoena.
Sure. Prof, thank you so much. Okay. All right. Professor Zethu Nkosi, the Executive Dean of the College of Human Sciences, my fellow panelists and speakers, Professor Derkotza, Dr. Plaiki, Professor Khalo, Dr. Shaku, and Professor Charlie in absentia, members of the College and University Management, the university's community at large, and colleagues that are joining us from other universities, social groups and organizations, and everybody joining us online, good afternoon. At its essence, the concept Rainbow Nation is about identity. At a very basic level, one can speak about 3 identities: assumed identity, ascribed identity, and achieved identity. One of South Africa's most celebrated ascribed identities is that of being a rainbow nation. The notion of rainbow nation is accredited to the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and he used this notion to describe democratic South Africa. The use of the rainbow nation metaphor was instituted
to promote and to reinforce nation building and reconciliation. And although ascribed to us, it was, and probably still is, an identity that most patriotic South Africans assumed. And in some sense, the Rainbow Nation became post-apartheid South Africa's achieved identity. We were proud that we managed to achieve peace, reconciliation, and avoid a civil war. But a rainbow is an optical illusion. It does not actually exist in a specific spot in the sky. The appearance of a rainbow depends on where you're standing and where the sun or your source of light is shining. Rainbows are about perspectives. Not everybody will see the rainbow. Additionally, because of each observer's perspective and the angle of the sun, and because they are different, no two people can see the same rainbow. For a while now in South Africa, we have not been seeing the same rainbow. Some of us never even saw the rainbow. In 1998 already, the then Democratic Party released a document titled The Death of the Rainbow Nation. This was 1998. We had just arrived. So for me, my view of the beautiful and unified South African rainbow was altered the moment I learned about Oranya's existence. I was baffled. If the existence of Orania indeed transgresses one of the founding values of the Republic of South Africa, which is non-racialism, why is it not shut down? Even more baffling, why have two black South African presidents, the former President Nelson Mandela and Zuma, diplomatically visited the town instead of shutting it down? So Oranya's enabled an uninterrupted existence in post-apartheid South Africa continues to cast an eerie shadow over a country that proclaims to be united in diversity, a country that claims to be a rainbow nation. For me, the existence of Orania is one of the biggest cracks in the rainbow nation that can no longer be plastered. From its official establishment in 1991, it has been a crack that was allowed to grow, but was attempted to be plastered by diplomatic presidential visits to the town. Sensationalistic and fear-mongering journalism, and using the existence of this Afrikaner-only town to incite anger against white people, trigger apartheid-related trauma, and gain votes for black political parties, cheap politicking. We continue to be emotional about Orania. We protest and we curse their existence in democratic South Africa every now and then continue with business as usual until it's politically relevant again to protest against Orania and condemn its existence in the strongest sense. Now this crack has grown big and wide enough that we can't hide it any longer. The crack now holds serious implications for the foundation on which our proverbial Rainbow Nation house is built on. Although AfriForum and Solidarity's correspondence with the United States of America and the visit to Washington, D.C., appears to be the straw that broke the camel's back. In 2022 already, representatives from Orania and Orania movement did exactly what AfriForum and Solidarity did in 2025. In 2022, representatives from Orania and Orania movement visited the Netherlands and Belgium to give them a version of their situation in South Africa. According to the Times Live article, they quote that the town has issues that its representatives, and these include farm murders, challenges with the failing state institutions, such as ESCOM and others. And they were speaking about Orania solutions. According to this article, representatives from Orania and Orania movement mention that, and I quote, the untenable situation of political discrimination, farm murders, crime, and Orania solutions for Afrikaners must be told to the world. Flemish politician then, in response to this, said that a lot of white farmers who are descendants of the Flemings, Dutch and Germans, are victims of political discrimination and crime. There are also many murders of white farm families. We hardly hear anything about this anti-white racism against our South African brothers and sisters from people in the media. This unsustainable situation must be told to the world. Close quote. Was there a treason charge laid against representatives from Orania and Orania movement? Were they labeled as unpatriotic? No. This underestimated crack that has been allowed to widen quietly but progressively in a corner in the Northern Cape since 1991, and to date, we continue to just have emotional reactions to Orania instead of information-based reactions and engagements. This is why my book questions whether South Africa is post-apartheid South Africa's boogeyman. Now you remember the boogeyman, right? Or Lisilo, and I'm showing my age here, right? And perhaps the Tokoloshi or Tokoloshi for some of us. We definitely remember Chanki. Remember Chanki? So these are the fictional characters, right, that were used to threaten children like me in my generation, and probably before my generation, to behave or to be faced with the horror of being visited by one of the creatures at night. But also, can you remember how it felt when you discovered that the boogeyman doesn't actually exist? That it was just a creation invented for fear-inducing processes? I vividly recall how empowered and obviously relieved I felt when I learned that Lisilo was a figment of somebody's imagination. His scary red eyes were lights. And his disfigured appearance was a costume. And the smoke, the smoke, that surrounded him each time he rose from the dead was special effects. The power of knowledge. So, who are we trying to scare into appropriate behavior by using Orania as a boogeyman? I contend that the town's supposed boogeyman status is favorably drawn on by both the residents of Orania and the majority of political leaders and parties that are predominantly black. You ask how? So Orania being portrayed as an anti-black space deters blacks from visiting the town for the fear of their safety. Such a deterrent is beneficial for people who stay in Orania, as it keeps the town white, or rather white Afrikaner, except for those occasions where black people can visit the OK store in Orania. And of course, the continued construction of Afrikaners as threatened and stigmatized subjectivities feeds into this apartheid narrative of swart gevaar. So if they keep the place white, they keep the swart gevaar out, which is the fear for black people. For the ANC government and fellow predominantly black political parties which have been ranting and raving about Orania, Orania's portrayal as an anti-black space and a supposed symbol of apartheid is opportunistically used to scare away black people into voting for the black government leaders out of fear that a white government will reinstitute the system of apartheid like they supposedly did in Orania. This post-apartheid mobilization against whites is colloquially referred to as white gevaar. So what do we do? What do we do now? How do we stop this fear of the unknown? How do we stop from being scared and angry at something we don't actually know anything about? Something that might be a well-constructed media craze and/or an actual threat to South Africa's sovereignty and mostly civil racial coexistence. as an academic and researcher, for me, knowledge is king. It is my belief that one of the purposes as researchers is to ask difficult questions, to do research on high-risk or volatile communities, and ultimately lean on our research to provide societal solutions and provide society with enlightened perspectives. And this is why I decided to do the research on Orania, to provide the South African society with information. And also because I was really tired of being senselessly scared of Orania just because the fear was normalized amongst Black people. So then the rest of my address, now that I've sketched the understanding of the Rainbow Nation, will focus on 2 myths about Orania. 2 myths that I contend we need to debunk so we can have a better understanding of Orania. The first one, and the one that I will talk about up until I'm blue in the face, is that Orania is not a folk stat. It can't be, right? I have lost count of the number of newspaper articles that proclaim that Orania is a folk stat. It's a lie. The countless repetition thereof does not render it a fact. It just makes it painfully clear that sometimes, as a nation, we refuse to think further than our noses and to question dominant narratives. Let us look at the definition of a Volksstaat. A former member of the Volksstaat Council, Chris Jooster, explains what a Volksstaat is. He clarifies that the term Volksstaat refers to a sovereign state for Afrikaners. A Volksstaat is defined as a predominantly homogeneous people in their country under their government, as distinct from a population, a country, and another government. In a submission to the Constitutional Committee for the Constitutional Assembly of the Volksstaat Council in 1995, explicitly states that the term Volksstaat can only mean a state for certain people. The document elaborates that the normal judiciary requirements for the existence of a state are territory, a government, a population, and the capacity to establish relations with other governments. The requirement of monetary sovereignty may be added to those requirements. Orania is not a Volksstaat. The Republic of South Africa is one sovereign democratic state, as explained in the Constitution. So, a Volksstaat or Volksstaat should not be a word we throw around lightly to increase ratings and as clickbait. The ANC outright rejected the idea of a Volksstaat during CODESA and during negotiations that led up to the finalizations of the 1996 Constitution, as evident in the following remarks. As long as I live, there will never be a Volksstaat in this country. And that was President Nelson Mandela. And then President Cyril Ramaphosa remarked that there is no place in South Africa for a Volksstaat. The only alternative I propose is that we make Robben Island a Volksstaat. So it is very clear that it's impossible that we can claim that Orania is a Volksstaat. Orania, however, is a town or settlement that is located on private property of a company that is relentless in its pursuit of actualizing the Afrikaner dream or to realize some version of self-determination. Albeit not a Volksstaat, Orania can be considered a micronation. A micronation is an entity that claims to be a sovereign nation. Claims. However, these nations lack recognition from other governments and major international organizations, though some have obtained recognition through the negotiation and visits with ambassadors of various countries. Thus, the definition of a micronation and the ability to obtain recognition through negotiations and visits with ambassadors of various countries, does it not hint at what Orania and AfriForum and Solidarity did respectively. I vividly remember a television interview on Newsroom Africa, during which news anchor Thabo Ndluli was in conversation with the head of the International Relations Solidarity Movement, Yakutleng Hans. Through the entire conversation, the anchor was essentially trying to establish why AfriForum and Solidarity think that it's within their scope as lobby groups to approach the US government and negotiate about matters that would typically be reserved for governments to negotiate on. After a long back and forth, I think the news anchor just looked at the guy and said, I have a problem with what you're trying to do. Isn't this what governments do? And this was and he asked, is it possible that you can change Donald Trump's idea of South Africa? Because the guy was claiming during the interview that their visit is the reason that Donald Trump stopped the sanctions on South Africa. And he said, we absolutely can. We represent a strong constituency in the South African and in the South African economy. We represent many farmers that export to America. We represent a very, very strong constituency in agriculture. The car manufacturing industry, the American government took us seriously, and they are still taking us very seriously, because we are talking on behalf of an important and strong constituency in South Africa. So perhaps instead of going back and forth about whether Orania is a Volksstaat, which is not, perhaps it's time to reconsider that South Africa might be one nation with many micronations. Micronations that may or not camouflage as lobby groups or movement groups. The second thing I want to touch on when it comes to Orania is this idea of self-determination. I remember I went to Orania and I was speaking to the person who was hosting me, and he looked me dead in the eye and he said, Lorato, you know, if we were not protected by self-determination, Orania would just be racist and illegal, right? So the only reason Orania can exist is because of the section 235 of the Constitution. That is the right that expresses the right to self-determination. Without this section, which makes provision for self-determination, Orania's existence would be illegal and not self-deterministic. It is clear that a Volksstaat never existed in South Africa. Instead, Volksstaat supporters had to settle for the crumbs in the form of the right to self-determination. However, as noted by Labuschagne, the tail end of the section 235 dampens and limits the right to self-determination. Considering the controversy that surrounds the demand for a Volksstaat and self-determination, it is plausible to conclude that the section 235 is an example of negotiations running out of time. A couple of authors remark about the fact that section 235 serves as an example of such a disjointed agreement plastered together with an escape clause. The first half of the text appeases Afrikaners, while the escape clause, determined by national legislation, serves the ANC. De Villiers 2014 states that the South African Constitution is mum regarding clarity-seeking questions about issues related to the section. One of the most significant issues pertaining to this section is that the Constitution does not define self-determination. And of course, following their recent visit to Kleinfontein, I think Mkhonto Wesizwe picked up on this, they vowed to introduce a private members' bill that clarifies what self-determination means. According to the MK's chief whip, the party suspects that the settlement, the Kleinfontein, which is another sort of a sister settlement similar to Orania, was abusing section 235 of the Constitution, which allows for self-determination for communities of shared cultural and language heritage. According to the chief whip, they hold the view that section 235 is vague, and it leads to all kinds of interpretations, and some of those lead themselves to apartheid kind of situations. So, according to him, they want to make sure that the clause is further clarified because we hold the view that as much as we must respect all the cultures, but the respect of all the cultures must not be in any shape or form remind us of apartheid, according to the Chief Whip. When I read that, I thought, finally, we are getting somewhere. If you think about the back and forth about Orania, the EFF going and saying, we're going to build shack. Then the EFF going and saying, we definitely want to stay there. Then the ANC saying, want to stay there. It is impossible to just wake up one day and not. My problem with how people deal with Orania is that we cling on to low-hanging fruits. We protest about it, we get angry about it, but the core of the issue is really the right to self-determination. If we start to understand what that means for South Africa, we will understand why Orania exists and how we can go about rethinking it, right? So now that we are thinking, or the MK has proposed, and I'm in no way supporting any political party, now that we are thinking about the root issues instead of dealing with symptoms and shamelessly just grabbing low-hanging fruit from the Orania racist tree, that is a conversation we can start thinking about, right? How do we think about this thing from a different ways? People always ask me, what have I learned from Orania and what can I take away from Orania? And my take has always been this, that if you look at Orania and if you go into it, you understand first it's private property. And just like your house, I can't come into your house and do as I please. It's really that simple. If you think about private property, I can't come into your house and demand what to do. This is the same thing with Orania. And the question comes up, can I go to Orania as a black person? You can. Go right ahead. But similar to me when I visit you, you know when you enter businesses, they say the right of admission is reserved. The same with Orania. And then I get the most popular question of all times. Is Orania racist? And I'm like, well, it depends. People are racist. Places are not racist. And it's the same with South Africa, really, where we find people are racist because geographical spaces cannot really be racist, right? So, colleagues and esteemed guests, as I conclude, let me emphasize that I'm not pro-Orania or pro-Afrikaner and subsequently, supposedly anti-black. I'm a researcher that is pro-information, pro-research, and most importantly, pro-informed decisions. For the longest of time, we've been fumbling in the dark about Orania and perhaps chasing our tails. The book I wrote aims to provide information about Orania that contributes to asking different and deeper questions, not only about Orania, but about South Africa. Thank you.
Sure, I think that deserves another round of applause. Whew. Thank you so much, Dr. Mokoena, for really unpacking the book, but also the thinking behind the book and why it was important for you to write this book, to enable us to have this conversation that we're having today, which I think without the book, there wouldn't really be spaces for us to have these conversations. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that just like me, you took a lot from the reflections that Dr. Mokoena has just given us. I'm tempted to share a few of my thoughts, but I'm also mindful of time. But just, the issue of the market and access to the market and how that gives the opportunity and the right to be able to approach another government, right? You're a political party, and you can approach another government because of what you have access to. And can we really separate many of these things from the issues, again, to access to land when you think about agriculture and the market and the access to capital that gives the possibility for parties or organizations such as Solidariteit and AfriForum to be able to stand the way that they do. But also, I think you've really reminded us of the importance, and I hope at some point we'll get to that point, of really revisiting the South African Constitution. Because much of the challenges that we're confronted with also stems from our Constitution, right? Linguistically, when you think even about schools, but I think Orania is also a very good example when it comes to how do we define and what does it mean really to have self-determination and what does that allow you to do. I think I shall pause here because we do have colleagues who are also going to offer their thoughts and insights and responses and reflections and provocations to the book and in response to Dr. Mokoena. And first, we have Professor Derkotse, who is from the Department of Political Sciences, Political Studies, here at UNISA, whom I shall invite to offer his thoughts for us. Please, let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks very much, Professor Sigalo. I just have a presentation, so. Good. Thanks very much. This is an exciting moment. And first of all, congratulations to Dr. Mokoena. I think this book is really breaking some barriers. It changes the sort of the stereotypes that I guess that exists about who must research what and who is qualified to research what and who are not qualified to research what. And I think the presentation that we've received now, listened to, is one of the best examples I can think of how someone moved out of the comfort zones, that normally exists, about what is easy or safe to research and what is out of bounds. So in that sense, I think this is for me personally, coming from political science, and this topic has a very strong political science component, or it's very strong in terms of its character, that she actually did this. And I think in future I will refer people to this book as something to read from, that it's not only coming from a very sort of, in a sense, stereotypical point of view. What I'm going to talk about, it's not yet up, what's wrong? Oh, there it is to look at these different components of Orania, the political components that I would say of Orania. The first is the Verwoerdian origin, then the Volksstaat phase, and then the solidarity's encroachment on Orania. And then maybe last, if there's still enough time, I've not more than 20 minutes, and I'm going to struggle to go through everything about this. The main thing about Orania is that it wasn't formed in 1991. It has a history that goes back to 1980, with the formation of, it was called the Vereniging, an association of Orania workers. And the people who became the leading persons in Orania later on were actually those who were already involved in this, and that is, for example, Karel Boshoff and some others, and even some people here from UNISA, we have to be honest, that were in law and theology, and some of them were Orania workers. So they were here, and the first settlement that they established was Morgenson. This is here in Mpumalanga, on the east from here, in 1984. Thereafter followed Orania and Kleinfontein, that you heard now already about, 7 years later, in 1991. Why I refer to the Verwoerd origin, or Verwoerdian origin of it, is that the first thing one should understand about conservative, right-wing Afrikaner politics, because there's also English right-wing politics, is that it's very diverse. They don't agree with each other. There's no homogeneity amongst these different groups. There are hundreds of groups that are within this context. And they sometimes fight each other more than what they are fighting the old National Party or later the DA or the ANC or others. So this Orania workers was one group. And what I want to identify is that within them, the influence of the former Prime Minister then, Hendrik Verwoerd, was very dominant. So this notion about Orania is very much can be traced back to the Verwoerd understanding, the Verwoerd definition of apartheid. Later came with the policy of separate development, which was still apartheid, but in a very more specific form. So many of these family became involved in this, were part of the Orania workers and later on Orania itself. For example, his wife, his father, his son-in-law, Karel Boshoff. Now Karel Boshoff, his own son, is now the leading figure there. So that if you hear Boshoff, then you must actually hear Verwoerd. As in terms of the influence there. But the Verwoerdian sort of stream amongst the conservatives are not the same as, for example, the Solidarity. They are not necessarily pro-Verwoerd, or taking forward the Verwoerd side of it. So you can see there the different, the one son, H.F. Verwoerd also, is also part, he was part of Morgenson. Morgenson disappeared, doesn't exist anymore. While the other two, Orania and Kleinfontein, did continue. Then if you go to Orania, and like Dr. Mokoena did, and showed in the book, there are photos of it and so on, of the monument of Verwoerd, of the fact that his wife stayed there, that it became a monument and a museum. There's, for example, there's an area that they call Stokkiesdraai, that refers to his farm, as well as to his holiday home in Betty's Bay in the Cape. So there's all sorts of Verwoerdian references, which creates a very specific notion about what Orania was about. Now, why 1980? Why did they start in 1980? One of the reasons is 1976. If you look at South African politics, and especially the white politics, the most important crisis moment where everything changed was 1976, Soweto. Up to there was a lot of confidence that apartheid is going to work. 1976 broke that sense of confidence, of sense that apartheid is going to continue. So that created an existential crisis. After that, 1979, another Unison person, Professor Nick Vian, he was at the business school, with the liberalization of labor relations, especially black labor relations. And then P.W. Botha started with what he called reform in 1978. So what does it mean, did it mean for the conservatives? We have problems. Our old way of looking at politics are under pressure. How do you respond? Create your own space, Orania, or the Verwoerdian group. The second one is the Volksstaat phase. Now, I agree with Dr. Mokoena. Orania was never and will most possibly never be a Volksstaat as it has been presented or is understood by most people. But there was a period where it was very close to it, and that was during the negotiations. And that started with 1990, where there were quite a lot of conservative groups that actually participated in the negotiations. It was the Conservative Party and a number of others. But at the same time, and this is maybe awkward to hear, it wasn't only them, it was also the former Bantustans. And they came together Botswana, Ciskei, and KwaZulu with the IFP. They formed a united group. They negotiated as one bloc, in the negotiations. And in many instances, when they decided, they walked out and they stayed out, and they created the type of a deadlock in the negotiations. So what we have seen is that those conservative groups, they were in favor of federalism. That means that the provinces that they anticipated should have as much powers as possible, like in the US with their states, on Canada, on Australia, on Switzerland, or many of the others. Plus then the call for a Zulu kingdom. There was a time during the negotiations where that became one of the main focus areas. To say, the IFP said, if there's no kingdom, we are out. That was and it was balanced very much whether the negotiations can continue or not. Remember, in the end, the IFP joined the elections 1 week before the election in 1994 because of this. So this became, and the conservatives linked up with the IFP. It gave them much more negotiation power than simply on their own. Now, Orania was established during this period. So this is the historical context for how Orania came about. It's during those negotiations. It was therefore a period of change, of uncertainty. They didn't know what the future was. And what's the response? Get into your own corner. Try to protect yourself. That was the one approach. The Volksstaat came therefore. That was possibly the time in our whole political history when the Volksstaat idea was at its strongest point. Then with the interim constitution, there were 34 constitutional principles that were agreed upon for the final constitution of 1996. One of them was self-determination, and that goes back to your point. And they agreed to establish a Volksstaat Council after the election of 1994. So it was part of the interim constitution. Then they agreed that the 1994 election will at the same time serve as a referendum on the Volksstaat. So the agreement was those people who vote for the Freedom Front, it was before it was PLOS, at the same and where those votes will be registered, where they will exercise, that will amount to or be regarded as at the same time a referendum for a Volksstaat. What was the result? The majority of the votes were here, Gauteng, which made the Volksstaat impossible, because it's the most diverse province to a large extent also. So that to a large extent was the end of the Volksstaat era. What happened with the final constitution, and Dr. Mokoena referred to it, and you can read it if you want, section 235. So the focus moved from Volksstaat to self-determination, but in a very general sense. Now, you all know, I guess, solidarity. They are very much in the news. Dr. Mokoena referred to it now in terms of Trump and their lobbying that in the US, which is not new. They've actually gone to the United Nations Council on Human Rights before with a similar message. And in the end, they've become a huge organization. Now, what I'm going to argue is that the question, if it's not a Volksstaat, what is it then? What is Orania? And I would like to say or argue that, and that's more or less in line with Dr. Mokoena, is that although, and that's another important point to remember, solidarity is not behind Orania. They are not involved in it. It's not the same thing. It's a different component. That solidarity tries to interpret and maybe co-opt Orania into their mold. But solidarity is busy with something else. Now, although they're philosophically speaking, No, I think they are relatively close to each other. Very often these organizations differ on the detail, and it becomes exceptionally important for them, the detail. Now, in the case of Solidarity, Flip Buys, their leader, wrote this book, Departmental Self-Bestuur. It's the road to what I would call self-management. It's not self-determination necessarily. And what Solidarity do, and I won't have enough time to talk about that, but is, I think, very interesting, and most people don't realize what is happening, is that Solidarity is developing into a huge organization that actually provides an ecosystem for people who support them, where they can live their own lives almost, you know. And as you can see down there, it consists of 18 organizations, which is Solidarity, the trade union, so you can be a member of the trade union. You can be a member of AfriForum, which is part of them, which is a civil society organization. Then they have an organization called Kaapse Forum for the colored persons, especially in the Western Cape. They are also part of AfriForum or Solidarity. Helpende Hand is for soup kitchens and all sorts of support bases. Academia is their university here in Centurion. Soltech, they have 9 campuses for technical training, which is at the highest level you can have. Verseker is an insurance company. Kgorong Publishers is their publishing company. Marula is their media company. Pretoria FM is their radio station. SAI is the Southern African Agricultural Initiative. So it's all over the place. You know? And that's where Orania fits in. You know? That it is within this sort of bigger environment of saying, if you are part of us, we can cater for you in all different dimensions of your life. You know? So this is, I think, where there is, but how do you make it now sort of acceptable to the rest of South Africa? They say they work with the notion of free cities, and they get it from the Chinese. That's no Solidarity. They say of free cities, Hong Kong, Singapore, and then during the Deng Xiaoping period, that really modernized the Chinese economy. He had the idea of developing 4 coastal cities, plus special economic zones, and that's where our special economic zones, like there, right in the north, near Makanda comes from. No, not Makanda, what's the place? Right at, just close to Messina. And that is to say that concentrate on cities as growth points, which is not necessarily the same as the rest of the country. Now, Solidarity says, well, this is the notion of Orania, that it can become this sort of unique growth point that can over time develop further. They talk also about key towns, 30 key towns that can do that. So they say, don't go on your own. Be part of South Africa, but be these sort of specific focus areas within South Africa. Now, lastly, is Orania a proto-state? First of all, it's part of an existing municipality. They are not in isolation. They don't work in isolation. They have only their own local committee that sort of administer or govern them. It's not typical of a state. And it will be interesting to know exactly what's the relationship between the municipality and their own internal committee. They don't have state symbols, majority of them. They don't have political leaders. They don't have a coat of arms. They don't have a local police. They don't have taxation. They don't have a judiciary of their own. These are all symbols of the state. They don't have sort of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, which is not part of the judiciary of South Africa. So what they do have, they have a flag. You will see it in the book. And they have a currency, ora. But you can only use it there. So it's not something which is, in a sense, accepted throughout the world. Very similar to northern Cyprus, the Turkish part of Cyprus. Very similar. Is there any question about secession, that they want to break away from the rest of South Africa? No. It's not like Quebec in Canada or Catalonia in Spain, or even the movements in the Western Cape, of the Free Cape, Scotland, South Sudan, that did become independent. There's no political movement. Do you know of any organization which is specific in Orania? No. So they don't have that sort of political mobilization within it. Freedom Front Plus also after can't now pinpoint it specifically, but moved away officially from the notion, I think it's the 2019 election, when they developed a relationship with Peter Maree in the Western Cape. Moved away specifically from the notion of a Volksstaat. So now it refers to itself, the Freedom Front Plus, as a party of minorities. And that is then, so what is Orania? I am not too serious on this point. I will call it the Section 235 internal refugees. And maybe it's an alternative for our security estates, but it is just now there in the Karoo, and it is something which is... So what's the bottom line of all of this? Don't overinterpret Orania. It's not this bogey that you are to... It is maybe for you, or maybe a little bit further removed from it. It looks dangerous, it looks as a threat, and it's not. Where I'm standing, and I've been for many years, this is one of the things I look at. It is just part of South Africa. And it's actually at its weakest point at the moment. Well, no, I should not say that. Trump gave them a little bit of prominence now. There's a bit of a revival of conservatism and right-wing and so Afrikaner and all of these politics. But he's there only for 4 years. He won't have a third term. That will then most possibly come to an end. Even these refugees of yesterday will come to an end. And there will be a sort of a calming down, I would say. So it's very topical that we have this book, but don't go away and feel threatened by this, or feel this is threatening the Rainbow Nation. It doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kotze. I think that was a very educational, historical excavation, if you will. And it goes back to, I think, what Dr. Mokoena was saying about the importance of us being informed, so that even as we engage, even as we're scared, or even as we challenge, that we do so from an informed position. And I think Prof. Kotze also assisted us in doing so. I'm always fascinated by Hendrik Verwoerd because I'm a psychologist, and we know he was also one, and it's always troubling that there was this man at Stellenbosch, and he contributed so much to many of the laws, rules, and regulations that the apartheid regime ended up putting in place. And this is someone who was in the same discipline that, one carries on the shoulder. So thank you so much. But also just the importance of understanding the histories of where we are as well, right? Prof mentioned a number of names, and I wonder how many of us are even aware of those names that are linked to UNISA as well, and some of the professors that actually contributed in the establishment of some of these spaces that we are engaging on and about today. The Broederbond and how the Broederbond functioned, particularly at the core of academic institutions. And these are some of the things and people and thinking that also gave birth to places such as Orania. So I'm now going to call Dr. Sebeka Plaiki from the Department of Development Studies to also offer us his reflections on the book. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I come here not in the best health conditions. I've got slight flu, so please, if you could just pardon with me if at all you do not hear me very well. And thanks to the previous speaker, Prof. Kotze, from whom we've learned quite a bit with regards to the history of the conservative Afrikaners, which I think, brings fresher perspectives into what I was going to say, because much of, this history, we do not know about the origins of apartheid, dating as far back as the 1980s, if you like. But with that said, thank you so much, colleagues. Program Director, Professor Sekgalo, I'd like to extend, my greetings to friends and colleagues and to students present here, and all those who are on the virtual platform, if we have. And also to thank Dr. Mokoena for inviting me to share some of my thoughts on her book about Orania. I must really say that I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. It is perfect in length and intimidating to the reader. However, it is rich with detail and sobering analysis, which I found not always obvious. I like particularly the academic-ish method you refer to in the book, and its contribution towards what you call evolution of the university from an ivory tower to a knowledge-based oasis that is accessible to communities, quoting Taylor. I will also try to employ this method in my reflections, and also try to answer some of the questions that she raises, namely, is Orania a post-apartheid South Africa's boogeyman? And 2, why have 4 presidents in post-apartheid South Africa allowed Orania to exist and to prosper? And 3, if Orania was truly a racist place of white supremacy, why Presidents Mandela and Zuma diplomatically visited the town instead of shutting it down? The subject of Orania comes at a time of great turbulence, uncertainty, and anxiety, spawned by the rise of nationalism and right-wing movements globally following the coming into office of the Trump administration. When the world's wealthiest human being jumps up and down with uncontrollable excitement, displaying a Nazi salute sign in celebrating the victory of the coming into office of a right-wing party in the most powerful nation on earth, and an administration that has since scoffed off all multilateral institutions and global solidarity, then we must know that Hitler was never defeated. He is well and alive, and now he's been revitalized through what Achille Mbembe describes as the politics of viscerality. For I may say, Hitler is an embodiment or a manifestation of evil which was unleashed through colonialism and which subsequently returned to the West. In this regard, it is well alive in Gaza in Palestine, just as Hitler is well alive in Kyiv, Ukraine, in Goma, Western Congo, South Sudan. He is alive in Orania, the subject of my talk, in Kleinfontein, in South Africa, and he thrives in the song, Kill the Poor, Kill the Farmer. He is everywhere in our political landscape, and he must be defeated. In the book, Mokoena compares the boogeyman, a mythical figure which is generally used in child stories to scare them into good behavior with Lisilo. Another mythical figure in a drama series of the old. A boogeyman is generally described as a shadowy, monstrous figure that hides in the closet under the bed and is generally at rest when children are in good behavior. The boogeyman, therefore, intrinsically is a good person because he inspires goodness in children. Lisilo, on the contrary, was not a drama for children, Dr. Mkwen. There was an age restriction to that thing. He was an extraterrestrial figure who lived not in the closet but in a grave, a sacred place of permanent rest for the dead. He would be called to resurrect not by the powerful word of God or Jesus, but his ill-fated handler Raikwana, who manipulated his loyalty and would instruct Lisilo to deliberately steal, destroy, and to unleash terror in the community indiscriminately. The power of Lisilo was therefore not in service of an ultimate good, but evil. Therefore, for me, an apt title for the book would read, Orania Post-Apartheid, South Africa's Evil. So I tend to look at Orania, the subject of our study today, as South Africa's post-apartheid evil, which is mobilized through the politics of viscerality, a type of evil and politics that is not only restricted to Orania, I need to understand, but also cuts across the modern political system and climate in South Africa and elsewhere. Mbembe explained viscerality as follows. He says viscerality marks vital organs of the body that are specially found in the cavity, organs such as the lungs and the kidneys. These organs are made up of soft tissue, as you will know, and are variously vitally important for the life of human beings. Any disturbance of these organs may bring death to the human being. Therefore, touching any of these organs elicits the response, which is generally a visceral response, which is impulsive, that suggests that any of these organs are at stake. So visceral politics therefore deploys the method of touching these vital organs. The pain of torture, the pain of suffering, of debasement, in order to generate a particular response. That particular response is not always rational or reasoned, but is impulsively transmitted by the trauma of the imminent death of the visceral subject. These vulnerable subjects who are descendable and incapacitated by the system are angry, frustrated, fearful, and have no place to go home. So if you touch their vulnerabilities, they impulsively react without much thought into that in most cases. This is the politics that petitions subject into action from the wound and the pain. Mbembe claims that through such actions of mobilizing political reaction from the wound, political claims cease to be advanced on ethical claims or moral principles of equality and justice, but claims of pain. I return to this point much later. In the book, Dr. Mukwena uses Chris Joster's conception of the false start to argue that Orania is not a false start but an Afrikaner town located on private property that capitalized on the constitutional provision of self-determination. She goes on to explain that what constitutes a false start state are the following: a territory, a government, a population, and capacity to establish relations with other government. Because Orania does not have a government and the capacity to establish relations with other government, it is therefore not a state, she argues. The fact that Orania does not fit the legal technical requirement to be declared a false start does not discount the fact that it looks, it feels, and certainly functions like one. Orania openly boasts all markers of a false start: a flag, its own currency, the Ora, Afrikaner monuments, and a whites-only population. And black people generally feel unwelcomed and as foreigners there, for whatever reason. The fact that something is lawful or unlawful does not always suggest that it is harmful or anti-progressive. Apartheid, which was later declared a crime against humanity, was sanctioned by law. And the forceful removal of the original residents of Orania to make way for Karel Boshoff III to purchase the land on which Orania was built was enforced through law as well. Again, it is against this background that we are also reminded by scholars in critical legal studies that the law protects the powerful and not the weak. That is why for more than 30 years, the majority of blacks still find themselves in poverty, even under a democratic dispensation, as argued by Mudir. Herein lies the answer to the question, why have 4 presidents in post-apartheid South Africa allowed Orania to exist? The establishment of Orania is protected by law. Section 235. Dismantling it would be unconstitutional. No president can do that. It is an establishment of law. However, imagine this question. Would Orania have existed if the law protected the weak? Put differently, would we have Orania under the law of the people? That is the law of the sovereign and ordinary people, and not only that of political elites represented at CODESA, as Mamdani also suggests in his book, Citizens of Subjects and Citizens. I will leave this for your imagination. It is therefore very important that we are reminded that the law is not always ethical. It is an instrument that is susceptible to manipulation and which produce undesired ends, if not underscored by ethical values. Here, phenomena such as apartheid and Orania in South Africa, including Jim Crow and new fascism as we see in the United States, manifest. For many people, Orania represent an apartheid Volksstaat. And this is for the following reason. Claims to the right to self-determination by those who call themselves the real Afrikaners, who are there, who Prof spoke about, and the actual establishment of Orania comes to the fore, as we know now, around the 1990s, 1993. At the very moment that South Africa was driving all efforts towards peace and reconciliation and unity symbolized by the Rainbow Nation. It also comes along before the high crime rates and allegation of farm murders were reported. These claims also come before the chronic mismanagement of the state and the pathological corruption in the ANC government we learned about from the Zondo Commission on State Capture was a matter of concern. The interest in self-determination by the Afrikaners in Orania therefore did not develop organically like that of a teenager who has come to age or who has grown disappointed about their parents' ways and wants independence to wander off away from them. The self-determination of Orania arises not within the context of a disappointment about an unfulfilled dream of reaching peace and reconciliation and a just society for all. This is a call for self-determination that can only arise from conquest, colonialism, and apartheid, which seeks to maintain the order of racial segregation and white supremacy in South Africa. The systematic manipulation of law to exclude non-whites from owning property and living in Orania, including the open memorializing of apartheid figures commemoration of public holidays which do not always correspond to national holidays under the veil of preservation of African culture and history, is the case in point. No reason to celebrate independent holidays, especially when we are told that public holidays are intentionally established for the supposed preservation and transfer of collective memory. Orania is therefore nothing similar to what people of Mnyameni in the Eastern Cape mean when they too state that they want to be less dependent on government and be self-sustainable and less dependent on party politics. I doubt people of Mnyameni, who Dr. Mokoena refers to, also have ambitions of establishing their own currency, because you do not need to have your own currency to be self-sustainable in South Africa. Only sovereign states have the currency. Mokoena is therefore correct to suggest that using the rand as a currency, Orania can be defined as a microstate. I want to add, Orania is a place, is actually a microstate with apartheid nostalgia, and a place for the industrial reproduction of white people, white supremacy, and white racism. And as an idea, Orania will not be successful. By being a whites-only town, Orania provides fertile ground for apartheid anti-miscegenation laws to regain their function and to realize their full potential without any threat. White people are reproduced in the purest form to sustain white supremacy without the threat of blood mixing through integration and the one-to-drop rule. That is the threat of making white people colored. Mokoena states that at the copy, bust of apartheid figures such as John Foster, Malan, Herzog, Paul Kruger, Verwoerd are memorialized. And of course, one will obviously begin to see the disunity within the Afrikaner community because that of P.W. Botha is not there, including that of de Klerk. Perhaps they fall within a particular sector of the conservative right. She states that the omnipresence of Verwoerd in Orania, a man considered to be the architect of apartheid and a crime against humanity, is felt everywhere in Orania. It is right here that we see Elisilo in Orania, an evil. We see here Kant's idea of radical evil and Hannah Arendt's banality of evil, and Mbembe's politics of viscerality at work. Immanuel Kant describes radical evil as a conscious and a deliberate act of poor moral choice to cause pain or injury. Hannah Arendt describes the banality of evil as an evil unleashed through ignorance or indifference and uncritical action. We can attribute this banality of evil to those residents of Orania, many of whom having been visceral subjects of the politics of Orania because of their unfavorable personal circumstances which brought them there. These visceral subjects of Orania are manipulated to think through the wound of poverty and a dream deferred, the impulse of which drives them into both poor moral choice, both consciously for Kant and unconsciously for Arendt, against blacks who are represented as responsible for their ill fate and the pain, and as bloodthirsty savages who want to rape white women and eat their children, and the idea of the Swart Gevaar. The fact that one respondent stated that they felt much safer in Orania amongst their ilk proves this very point of the Swart Gevaar. We must remember that apartheid was largely motivated by the poor white problem, which posed the risk of their integration into black community and ultimately disturbing whiteness as we understand it. Specific laws were passed to protect this class and to create a buffer between it and the black community in general. No surprise, therefore, that Orania is popular also amongst this class. The monumentalization of apartheid and its architects under the pretense of preservation of Afrikaner history and culture in Orania, including also the letter found, which at the monument, at the museum, which is alleged to be from the people of the Bantu of Kgorong, which insinuates that the Bantu also love Verwoerd, opens the visceral wound of apartheid as well. In similar way, this wound is often touched and manipulated by opportunistic political elites to mobilize political action for their own narrow self-interest. For example, on one occasion, Ramaphosa was surreptitiously caught on camera while campaigning for the ANC in Polokwane, whispering in reply to a disgruntled voter who would not vote ANC, saying, you know, if you do not vote for the ANC, the Boers will come back and take the land. In this instance, we see Ramaphosa employing Wet Gevaar, fear the Boer, fear apartheid, they will come and take the land back. Such fear-mongering tactics employed by Ramaphosa, including the Swart Gevaar that is propagated in Orania by political elites, deepened racial tensions and divisions in South Africa a country that has already suffered a history of strained race relations. Very often these divisions are mobilized on all sides of the racial divide, not for any genuine interest for justice, but to legitimate the existing political elites as the vanguard of the liberation struggle and revolution, whatever that means for the ANC and its splinter groups, or the covenant on the part of Afrikaners who still fantasize about their folk. Such is not a politics in the quest for a true humanity, but a politics that is an expression of the lust for the will to live of the humans, to quote Dussel, and for which Cornel West describes as predatory politics in service of predatory capitalism. This is the mode of politics, is not in service of anyone but the actors, and no less evil than the infamous death of those 34 mine workers who were gunned down by the police in Marikana during the protest strikes of workers demanding a minimum wage of 12,500 at Lone Min Mines in 2001. Or Andries Tatani, a community activist who was shot and killed in cold blood by the police while protesting for basic services in Fixbeck in the Free State in 2011. And the victims of life at Sitimeni, or the song Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer. Hitler is all alive in this. South Africa suffers from unresolved race relations, but these are not as deep as political elites make up to be. Much of racial tensions are deliberately instigated by political elites themselves. And this was only pointed out in the Public Protector's report to Lima Donsela in 2016, in which she notes, amongst others, that Paul Bell Pottinger, a UK-based political public relations company that served as an advisor to former President F.W. de Klerk, was hired by the Guptas to stir up racial anger in South Africa, mounting a hateful and a divisive campaign to divide South Africa along the lines of race, with white monopoly capital as the mantra. We know what happened subsequent to that with the July unrest. There's no better example than that. South Africa has strained relations because of apartheid, but even under the prevailing circumstances, racial divisions among ordinary South Africans are not as irreconcilable as it is made out to be. We learned from Solplaatjes Mohudi that the Boers under Chief Tawana entered into alliance with the Boers against the Mziligas, his hostile army, whose destruction, and I quote, had no justification in fact or in reason, but actuated by sheer lust for human blood. We learn also of Cetshwayo's crowning of the dance as part of the Zulu royals. We learn about the Bantus who joined on both sides of the warring Boers and the English in what is now called the South African War, and no longer the Boer War. We also learn from Plaatje's native life as well that many white farmers opposed the 1913 Land Act, and that many whites preferred skilled black labor over unskilled white labor. We also sit in this room not ready to strangle each other like they do in Parliament. To conclude, what are the facts and what can we do? Izwe ngelethu. The Boers are going nowhere. A black majority government is pathologically corrupt. And we have an inept government that must be removed. What do we do? Thank you.
Nizwi langit. Dr. Plaatje, thank you so much. Thank you for challenging us, and thank you for opening up the conversation and provoking us as well. And offering another layer of how we need to understand Orania in the broader historical, cultural, and political landscape of South Africa. Thank you for bringing back those names that we often forget, of the people that we've lost as a result of political issues and challenges that we have in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our panel here behind me. As I said, so now we have the opportunity for reflections and comments and engagements with our panelists from all of you. So we'll take a few rounds, so I'll take 3 at a time. I know maybe many of us have been provoked, but I'm going to try that even as we offer our comments, we try and confine ourselves in terms of time as well. I apologize in advance. So who will go first? Okay, I see you. Please go ahead, and then I'll take as and when the questions come and comments come. And please just introduce yourself and maybe where you're from. Thank you. All of them don't work. Okay, we have roving mics, so that's okay. Plan B. We might just need someone to assist us.
Good afternoon. My name is Melusi. I am from the Department of Communication. And it's just a small contribution, shame, to the larger conversation, because I think that it would be unjust for us to attend to this. So one of the things that emerges in the conversation is Section 235 of the Constitution and the right to self-determination. Currently, the Committee of Constitutional Review is accepting submissions on amendments that can be made to the Constitution, I mean. I think that there are many things in our Constitution that we've realized are the cause of what we're experiencing now, and maybe this is an opportunity for all of us in this space who are interested to consider making those submissions. They're accepting them until the end of the month, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that useful contribution. I think sometimes when we talk about how things need to change and why they need to change, when an opportunity arises, we often don't take it up. So here is an invitation. So please, let's check and offer our comments. Anybody else? Oh, here. Nozi.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Nozu Golanga. I'm from the College of Human Sciences and Information Sciences, but I'm leading a disability unit for those who didn't know under HS. If you have any problem, come to me. If you have any student with a challenge. Okay, thank you very much, Profs and Doc. This is very interesting. Now, the thing that I would like to ask you, both of you, is as we are actually talking about the ANC must leave, do you think that is there any political party that will be able to deal with the situation of Orania, that will be bold enough? Because I believe that if there is any political party that thinks that is strong, this should have been dealt with, and actually Orania be removed at all and form part of South Africa, because I also say that these people, they also benefit in both, I don't know whether countries or whatever. They have properties here, a lot of properties, and they've got a lot of properties in Orania also. And again, they are using a lot of resources from South Africa, but they do not want to see blacks in their areas. So, my question to you, Prof. Kotze, is that do you think that when that time comes of them to be actually where us blacks, we actually invade their space, do you think that there will be peace, or we will go back to the apartheid and the death of the black people? Thank you.
Thank you, Nozi. Datemuloi, this side up there. Okay, and then I'll take another one because I think the first one was more of a comment. Okay, I see you.
Thank you very much to the three colleagues for the contributions they have made, and in particular to the wonderful doctor for the wonderful work that has been done. What I'm sensing is the crisis at the metaphysical comprehension and a struggle of trauma on account of the history of violence. It may seem for black people to stay in white communities is symbolic of something, of progress. We can see it even as we move in some of the malls. You have a white population moving to create another mall. So somehow it's like we have become the chasers of them in our need for redefinition and affirmation. Could it be that at a psychological level, it's a form of psychosis that has created a trauma to crave whiteness and to become its pursuer in our own definition? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moloi. Here in front, here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kukundlazi. I am from the Philosophy Department. My question can be responded perhaps by all speakers. My question, or at least my apologies, I wrote it down, so I'm just going to read from what I wrote. So, my thoughts are, I understand, maybe perhaps for the lack of a better word, I'm using understand the legal implications of the existence of Orania, as Dr. Plagge has mentioned, the legal implication of the existence of Orania. However, I'm wondering, what about the ethical implications of the existence of Orania? So maybe perhaps that could be a question that the speakers may touch on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The law is not always ethical, he said. Okay, so just one last point there, and then the rest will take a second round. I'll give my speakers the opportunity to respond so we don't over-bombard them.
Well, thank you very much to the presentations and stuff. It's David Ngubuka, UNISA sabbatical resident, HSRC researcher. So as we would like to understand this generation, as we are competing with them by Buffett too, is if maybe we'd like to ask, is it gonna be the weapon of mass destruction, this city or whatever? Or is it a inheritance of a generation? What is it? Is it a generation that inherited the apartheid brutality? Or is it Donald Trump over a few days said we must close Guantanamo Bay? So do we think also, would they welcome also those murderers of our, like that guy who was recently came out of prison, one Lucianus, that guy would get visa from that seat or dead Mubani. Chinatown, Prof, he did nicely. Or what can we learn as a black cities? Is it a smart city, the thing? Or for development's sake, what can we learn? Or Siakolisa probably could get the public permanent status there. We don't know. South Africa, please help us to solve this crime. Thank you very much. If they sing in the same national anthem, Ola.
Okay, I'm going to give the opportunity to my panel to respond. So whichever you would like to respond to or to speak back to or to reflect on. Would like to go first? Okay, Prof, you're next to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad about this, that it goes in this direction, this discussion. First, I think the first question was which party will be able to deal with Orania. The only party that has done anything so far is the EFF. They have now marched recently to Orania and thereafter to Kleinfontein, but no one else. So what does it tell us? Is it that there is indifference about it? Or is it that there is a feeling that at the moment they are in a strong position, that they are having the protection of the government or the constitution or so? It's difficult to say what is it and why there is this sense of indifference. Now, when I made my presentation, I said to you, don't be scared about them and don't overinterpret this. Because from, the people around me who are Afrikaans speaking see it as if we must not take them serious because they don't represent the sort of the Afrikaner community. They are not typical of the Afrikaner group in general. They are the exceptions. They are the strange ones, the people that you don't take seriously because they are not like us, like we, like whatever you want to call it, So that is why it is, in a sense, they are saying they are there in the Karoo, or close to along the Orange River, but they are not one that makes a direct impact on the South Africa of today. So I don't think if that is one of the explanations, I think the follow-up or related question is, it was something like, when we invade, will it lead to peace? I think what at the moment, and why does the current government, that I would say is the government of national unity, but very much the ANC, why don't they not do anything about it? I think what is at the moment, it is a very strategic, tactical, whatever you want to call it, consideration, and that's to say, given what went on yesterday, and given Trump, and given the outstanding issues about what Trump's policy towards South Africa is going to be in future, because that is completely unpredictable, is that there's many people now in government who are saying, don't provoke Trump. And if you do something to Orania, it will immediately seen as a provocation. So that's now a way in which you try to, I would say, they will justify non-action. The other one is the Constitution. The one thing you can't say about Solidarity is that they are not very active when it comes to challenging court cases or going into court. They have more than enough money, unfortunately. So they can do that. The one thing which I think one should also keep in mind is that we talk about Orania, and Orania is now very much in the focus. But in terms of the big picture of South Africa, how big is Orania? As it is it's something that exists, which it's absolutely clear, it's something which is a contradiction in terms of our existence. But take, for example, the Freedom Front Plus. What is their support base at the moment? It was in the previous election 1.5, it's now 0.8% of the total. So they're actually in decline. And they are not even together supporting Orania. So what do I try to say? Is that the component that represents this is a very small component of South African society in general. Now to come now to the question about what's the ethical implications. The ethical implications for me is simple. It's discrimination. Our Constitution distinguishes between positive discrimination and negative discrimination. This is negative discrimination. And that is from a moral, ethical point of view, I can't justify it. And I think many other people similar to me, speaking Afrikaans and so on, also cannot justify. Because one thing which we haven't spoken about if you are English but white, do you think you will be welcome in Orania? No. 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 So it adds on another dimension. It's not only the racial component, it's a racial plus Afrikaans component. Because in a sense, why do I have, it's not up anymore, but the this movement now, AfriForum and Solidarity, why do they reach out to the so-called colored people? Kaapse Forum. They're Afrikaans, even if they are not white. So it's sometimes slightly complicated. There's not colored persons in Orania, and I don't think they will accept them. So that is where Orania becomes a particular problem. It is discriminatory at different levels. And I think this is why some people within, even the conservative groups, have a problem with Orania. So I think I should, what's the future of Orania? I think it's in decline. Given what we have spoken about now, what I've said to you also, and the fact that although it looks with the Trump sort of atmosphere that he creates as if their tails are up, and that it looks like they are making an impact internationally, and that other conservative governments in Italy and in Hungary and many other parts of the world are very prominent at the moment. It's the time of conservatism in the world at the moment. So it gives them a sense of we are in a stronger position than in the past. But that's not going to last very long. I can see these are cycles. So that is why I can't see ultimately. Because Orania is in a sense stagnant. There's not an inflow of people going there to say, well, we want to become part of them. It's a sort of a very particular group of people with a very specific mentality who are there. So, yeah, I think after today, hopefully, it will ask a lot of questions and challenges for all of us to think maybe slightly different from what we've done in the past, including myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues, about this question. Well, I'd like to start on the ethical side to this problem, and have a slight, difference in terms of approach with Professor Kotz on this one. Of course, many Afrikaners, as Prof has said, do not subscribe to the idea of Orania. But at the same time, we cannot allow it to exist as it is without condemnation. There's an ethical requirement there that it must be called out. Equally, just as we have a moral obligation to call out kill the farmer, kill the Boer. It's a small section of black people, or Africans if you like, who sing that song. But wherever it is, we must be able to condemn it, because it is communicating a message. And we cannot just leave it to lie there, and die on its own devices. We can't allow that. It becomes a mockery out of everything that people have done to achieve whatever it is that we want to achieve, or the directions that we cannot. After all, yes, we can understand the Boer, but the farmer, where do we get the food? Anyway, I will leave it there. On the question of, so there is an ethical requirement that wherever evil raises its head, we must call it out. We can't just leave it out and think it does not exist because it grows. The population of Orania was 2,500. Now it's how many, Prof? Doctor, it's 3,000. It grows. Even if it grows in small numbers, but it grows, and it grows horns. and later you feel the horns somewhere, you know. But also, yeah, so there is a ethical, you know, responsibility to reply to that, to respond to that. And also, on the next question, on why do we always have to chase, it seems as if raised by Dr. Moloi, that we chase whites wherever we go. I think that there's a lot of psychological connotations, which I think Prof will assist us there. Except for me to mention that, remember, whiteness has always been tied to privilege. So it is a natural movement that when people rise up in society, we also want comfort. So that is not the sole preserve of white people to occupy those spaces where they are. But what we have seen is that in most cases, wherever people, black people move, you know, to access those comforts, some of them move away elsewhere. But we will see how that does. But I think that's for me the only logical explanation as to why this movement happens in this way. Otherwise, yeah, thank you.
Colleagues, I want to touch on the question that Gugu asked about the ethical implications for the existence of Orania. You know, this is probably the most difficult thing I had to do as a black person in Orania, where a part of me and supposed black ancestry was like, what are you even doing? And I had to stand in the Verwoerd Museum and pretend like I'm not faced, and, you know, see his stained clothes and blood-stained clothes and act like this is all about research. But then you go back and you sit and you're like, I get why you exist and what enables you to exist. But I'm not too sure why my heart and my stomach does not agree when I'm in your space. And I think when we think about the ethical implications, for me, the first one is to ask ourselves, 30 years after everything has been said and done, do we want to continue having spaces where not everybody's stomach is okay with them being there? And I know people might say, and a lot of people say, oh, but you know, you can come and visit Orania, and believe it or not, somebody has actually compared Orania to other neighborhoods in South Africa. The same way Prof alluded to it being the security estate, people have said, but it's nothing better than Guguletu, where only black people stay, right? But that's another conversation for a very difficult day. But when it comes to Orania and the ethical implications, for me, when I sat down, I had to ask myself, do I want to be part of a South Africa, whether you have to ask permission or not, whether I want to be in spaces where I know my skin color is a problem? And for me, if we can sit down and figure out what self-determination means without other people feeling less than, or the fact that they don't belong in specific spaces, and to fear for their safety. For me, that's the biggest ethical conundrum about Orania, where the people can go and be like, it's okay, I belong. And I think we should minimize spaces in this country where people's skin color automatically makes them stand out and people fear them, or they have to feel like they have to protect themselves extra because they are the odd one out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you haven't, I would like to encourage you to please write a reflective piece on the actual journey, the process, because I think also from a psychological standpoint, those are very important, I think, moments and points that we often don't engage with and reflect on how you embodied the whole space and the whole experience and what that meant and what we can learn in terms of how we inhabit spaces and what that does to us in terms of our histories and the ancestry that we carry and the implications of that even as we enter such spaces. I think it will be a very important piece and contribution that I would like to challenge and encourage you to consider working on. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running a little behind schedule. We started a little bit late, so I'm going to ask for your indulgence. We're going to take the last round because I think it is important to hear more voices. I'm interested also to just hear some of your reflections and feedback, also in engagement with Dr. Mokoena and the colleagues next to me. So I'll take a few more. I see 2 here. 3, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Munene from Development Studies. Thanks for the great presentations from all the speakers, and to Dr. Mokoena. I look forward to reading your book. But my question is just, well, not first a comment to say that I agree with the speakers that really Orania should really be less of our problem as Orania. But we've got a bigger problem way outside Orania. There is this issue of race, which many experience every single day. If you've been to the Karoo, I've done some work in the Karoo, and some of the towns are very, very isolated. And some of these things are still happening under some municipalities that are in the democracy. So in one of the experiences, I'll be quick, was that one of the towns still had a bell. And then we asked, what was the bell for? And they said, no, the bell is for all the workers to go back, to leave the town. And this was we were sitting with the person at the municipality. We were at the local municipality. So the fact that the speakers, Dr. Blackie did mention that, we've had so many precedents. We're only thinking of Orania, but all these things are still happening. All these municipalities, they're still allowing these things to happen. And of course, when you sit at our dinner table, one always wonders, we speak of a rainbow nation maybe at our households, but you turn to look at the behavior of some of the Afrikaans kids. I've experienced that when Afrikaans, small kid, 6-year-old, saying to the father, he says, look, there's the swart mense, and you wonder to say, what are the conversations around the dinner table? Hence to say, really, should we really be worried about Orania, which is a small estate, if we were to refer to that, where else we've got a bigger problem that still exists in our country. The other one is just on, and of course, to add on that, can we say, if Orania wasn't what Orania is, do you think that many South Africans, given what happened yesterday with Afrikaners wanting to leave, and many of them actually, do we think that if Orania wasn't Orania labeled as it is, doesn't that say that many South Africans yearn for that, what is happening in Orania, but because of the stigma to say, I'm in Orania, because the behavior is still the same, so do we think that many South Africa do have that nostalgic moments to say we just want to be us as South Africans and continue as things are? The only thing is that, there's the so-called law, there's, will be stigmatized as this, but the behavior doesn't change, it was quite alarming. And then I remember in a few years, there were some people in Cape Town wanting to succeed out of South Africa. It's something that we don't speak about. There was a petition around that they wanted to succeed. So, it's just all these things happening in a democratic state, and like Prof said, the focus is on Orania, which is a small place. And the last one to Dr. Black, you touched on the issue of race and class. And my question maybe to Dr. Mokoena would also be that, what is the experience of yourself? I'd like to place in a different class. What would be your experience in Orania? And somebody who's at a much lower class, or a worker or something, especially when we enter some of these communities. And I think we mustn't be shy to speak about certain estates in Pretoria also, where it's mainly white people. I think many of us do experience that. So, in terms of race and class, you mentioned an important thing to say. Many of these movements are driven by the poor people. And I'll ask you an unfair question, Dr. Blackie, to say, what is your thinking around black townships and, the so-called very reserved white communities, if I were to use that word? Thanks.
Thank you. If you could just to your left, there's the gentleman.
Afternoon. So I was following the proceedings online, and I just had the thought as the responses were happening right now. The name is Usindi Sorantlabati, student in comms. I also freelance as a reporter for a publication, and recently was covering the Klipfontein March by the EFF. And it was an interesting conversation that I had with a gentleman there who basically spoke about, we want a town or a place there where the rules work, where systems work, and that's what we are trying to build here. Then I came and said, is it really a question of systems working or entrenched racism? And I asked them, but we have a government that's working, police, but services are not working. Here, as you can see, they're marching. We are putting in a new road. Difference is that we're being productive, they're being destructive. So now I want to just understand that concept is that when you look at such conversations, I'm playing devil advocate. Are they justified? Is it really a sense of maybe them trying to establish a working system per se in codes? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. This way, Kobus, to the right.
Thanks. Stefan, anthropology, I'll try and keep it quick. It's a comment and contribution more than anything else. Okay. Just to say that for those of you who do follow some of the things going on, I think a year or two ago, there was a case, I believe in the High Court, related to Kleinfontein, where I believe it was a case of one group of people within the settlement versus the people governing the settlement. The two had a dispute between each other, but the outcome of that was effectively that the municipality has to apply the correct municipal laws on the municipality, and that means that, as an example, if there's a certain population density within a specific place, it has to be zoned correctly, and it also means that certain quality infrastructures has to be the correct standard or whatever else, and regardless of the fact that you might be privately owned and governing it in that kind of way, you are still effectively, you have to abide by the same kind of laws as everyone else. And so effectively what's happened, as I understand it, is that the governing organization of Kleinfontein is now effectively forced to make alterations to how it actually functions in a way that it can't continue functioning the way it has for a long period of time. So perhaps I wanted to say to Doc Mokoena, perhaps if you could respond to sort of ways in which maybe Orania functions as compared to Kleinfontein, because the two are quite different. And I think thank you for the book, and also thank you for talking to us about this. I think it's really insightful, and it really sort of tells us quite a bit about what it means to actually listen and use information. A lot of interesting things happen related to Kleinfontein that I think is worth investigating in terms of the materiality of it. But thank you to all the speakers. Everyone is welcome to make a response. I just wanted to share a little bit in a way that we haven't shared. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Is there one last burning comment? I'm closing it off. I'm looking to my left and to my right, and that's it. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to give my speakers just like 2 minutes each to please just make your response and your concluding comments. Dr. Mokoena will be the last one to just close off for us, and then we'll go to the vote. So, Doc?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Munana, for the question. Let me just try to reply on this one, on the idea of race and class. I wish that the way historians here would probably assist us as well, Prof, maybe also as well. But the issue of class, actually the issue of apartheid itself, was highly motivated by the idea of the poor whites. Job reservations, all these things were targeted especially to intervene, in order to assist the poor whites, and for one specific reason in particular. And this reason is that they were not supposed to be integrated into the black community, because once they integrate into the black community, whiteness, as we understand it, as pure, ceases to exist or it dissipates. So hence they had to be given privileged status. Hence there were also these rules, these anti-miscegenation rule, Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act, Anti-Miscegenation, Immorality Act, and all those things in order to keep these. So the poor had to be protected and defended. And now, hence, I also like to understand what did, Dr. Mokoena see there? I mean, did he see a Rupert there, Because chances is that also would be a little haven, because now we are increasingly seeing a white poor problem also emerging, Perhaps this is a space for them to say, please come here. Of course, that would obviously also have its own racist undertones and things like that, for the preservation of this, to avoid the one drop rule. Yeah, I think so, but maybe historians will assist us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually don't know what to say now. Because there's so many things that one can talk about. About nostalgia, I'm not sure, there is certainly, I would say that the difficult point for me is where I am and where I must speak in public, is what causes what we've seen, what caused what we saw last year in the election. Why did the ANC lose so much? Why is the DA slightly stronger than before? Why the emergence of MK? In terms of the things that we are talking about now, and that's about emotions, it's about nostalgia, it's about where do you want to be in South Africa? Because many people believe politics define the other things, about your lifestyle, about your environment, where you live, and so on. So is it nowadays less about ideology and more about material things? Is it now more about class and less about race? Is it more about what happens with my children, their future? So is it about the ideal is to live in a security estate because it's possibly a higher quality of life, more secure, more... These are, for me, difficult questions to deal with at the moment because, and I think the issue about Orania might be linked to that, or Kleinfontein, or which other areas, about that it is that these psychological things that you would refer to are, in the end, it's not just the old politics, but there's also, there's certainly a change in the nature of our politics, that's for sure. And we see it in terms of how the parties position themselves. So how does it affect, for example, we as the older generation are saying the young generation is now just concerned about their phones and about their social media and about all of that. They are not interested in public life anymore. So it's a different definition of your personality, of your living environment. And again, how does it affect, is something like Orania, is it attractive? I don't think so, because, well, maybe I'm idealistic, but I think what we have become used to is this notion that South Africa is slightly different from many other parts of the world. And that it is, despite what we are all saying, it is in some way a success story about something that was highly disrespected, rejected, ethically, morally, completely unacceptable, to something which is, what can one say? It's different, at least. And at that point, I think it is now about Kleinfontein and others is, what is both in the case of Kleinfontein as well as Orania, they are still subject to the municipalities. So it's not as if it's a completely different setup where they govern themselves. They don't. They have certain rules, more in terms of residents who can live there, and then about sort of the cultural component of it. I don't want to justify it. Please don't interpret or understand me to say, well, Orania is okay. Let's forget about it. I personally believe Orania cannot be justified in the South Africa of today. It is now a question of how to do it so that it's not being exploited, especially from the outside. Because what we've learned about Trump is not so much that AfriForum and Solidarity was so successful. It is the fact that communication, what Ambassador Rasool was saying on an online webinar at Mistra was the cause of the problem in Washington. That's the nature of our politics nowadays, which means that whatever we are saying, even here today, might go somewhere else. And I think that is the concern nowadays, is that there's possibly too much often concern that we must be careful of what we are saying and doing in South Africa. So something like Orania to do something against them, or Kleinfontein or whatever else, is for the moment at least off the table. But thanks for the discussion. I think it was a very fruitful discussion, and it puts this book definitely in the spotlight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you for the suggestion about Orania and Kleinfontein. It is something I've been pondering on, and something I hope to do soon. Must just see how that research grant funding works out. You bring up a topic that, whenever I talk about this, wherever I need to remark about it, I fear the labeling of, many different labels, but the first one probably is the reality that sometimes in South Africa, we don't want to call a spade a spade. The conversations and the things that happen in Orania are nothing different from what happens at our dinner tables. Nothing different from what happens when you greet a person in a language that you understand, and they don't greet you back because you didn't greet them in the language that they know. Nothing different from when we celebrate Heritage Day, but instead of thinking about a heritage in a way that builds us, you wear your attire, I wear my attire, and we go on about how this is me and this is you, and that subsequently separates us. And so when we think about Orania, I remember leaving Orania and thinking, but I've heard this before. I've seen this before. I saw it with heartful Cape Townians who said that they want the Western Cape to not be part of Cape Town, of South Africa anymore, and that too many black people, Xhosa people, go to the Western Cape. I see it every time when I had to reprimand my mother from allowing my niece to call a white person a boer, and in the way they understand a boer to be. And so whenever I must respond to the question, I left Orania thinking, it's only that they have private land and that they can do these things behind closed doors. But they happen every day. They happen when we refuse to admit that we are a country that the Constitution, if you look at the Constitution of South Africa, it separates us according to ethnicities and according to languages. And we keep perpetuating this idea. And therefore, Orania is not strange. They just own property. And so whenever I say this, I get a bit scared. And I wonder, won't people walk around and think this child is really crazy? And I'm okay with being crazy, for as long as we remember that we are celebrating multilingualism and multiculturalism that divides us but doesn't connect us. If you walk around the corridor and you can't greet another person back because they greeted you in a language that you don't feel like associating with, you're nothing better than the people that sit in Orania. I know it's controversial, but we'll be all right. And so, what does it feel like to be in Orania in terms of economics? Orania actually has a section for your supposedly rich people and your poor people. They call it Klingbegin. So I asked about Klingbegin and they're like, look, we take care, in not so many ways, it was said, but they take care of this. And this is the idea, this poor white problem. In Orania, first of all, everybody in Orania works. You're employed to do some sort of job. Only white people, but the point is that you are employed to work. And they have different funding systems available to help the upcoming people to not be unemployed and to not be out of a job, so that they don't, if you think about it, embarrass them and lead back to this poor white problem, right? So in Orania, you have your rich people, your shop owners, your professors, your doctors, but you also have the people that do menial jobs, but they take care of this, and hence there's a section of Orania called Klingbegin, which means small beginnings. So that is to answer that. How I felt in Orania was very normal. I came into Orania and it was okay. I guess I sort of a sanitized understanding of Orania, but once I started walking around and started asking, do people ever fight with each other here? And they do. They're human beings. They fight with each other. They disagree with each other. But what matters is that they are keeping theirs. Right? And so, in conclusion, colleagues, Orania, although a small population and although people that we can easily ignore, if we think deep about it and if we ponder about it, Orania could be symbolic of what we go through as South Africans. Deep within Orania could be things that we don't always want to talk about, but things that we want to be. We want to be by ourselves. We want to speak with people of our own languages. And that is what happens in Orania. And so if nothing else, we are at a moment where we think of Orania not just as a small town that we tend to ignore, but possibly at a place that might signal where we are moving towards if we don't start really figuring out what we mean when we say we are united in diversity, and what we really mean by saying that South Africa is a country that belongs to all who live in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How many minutes? Okay. All right. Dr. Shaku, when we started, you welcomed us so beautifully. So now I would like to give you the opportunity again, a few minutes, to come and offer closing remarks for us. What have you heard and how do you put it all together for us? Let's give him another round of applause, please.
Thank you so much, Prof. Tshekala. Colleagues, may we please just applaud our panel for this engaging conversation. We can do better. And that second round of applause, it's your confirmation that you're going to buy the book because it's outside. So I will start by thanking all key stakeholders who played part in organizing this event, starting with the organizing team who made sure that this event becomes a success. Secondly, I will also direct my words of appreciation to the multimedia for covering this event. When we started here, Prof. Ngosi did the opening. She welcomed us as our mother. And indeed, after her welcoming, we felt at home. Thank you so much, Prof, for always supporting us. Your endless support will never go unnoticed. To Dr. Mokoena, I feel so honored to be your colleague, because it shows that indeed UNISA or Unisens, they carry South Africa. We are not just coming here to do things which are not speaking to our community. However, the things that we engage in are actually vital, and I'm happy to see an academic being dynamic like you. I know more often as academics, we focus more on writing for journal publication, but we fear to tap into other spheres. Thank you so much for the courage that you had to engage this sensitive issue. Let's give her a round of applause. To our members of the panel, Professor Godze, they said you are the celebrity of UNISA, and indeed you are, because I first saw you on Newsroom Africa, so indeed you are a celebrity. Dr. Plagi, thank you so much for the thought-provoking discussions. I wasn't wrong in the beginning when I said you are intellectually qualified. So indeed, the way in which you spoke before us, you showed that you are intellectually qualified. And from your inputs, we learned a lot. Let's give them a round of applause. To our moderator, we really appreciate the efforts, your ability, the skill, and this is evidence that indeed when we have someone like you directing a program, we will never go wrong. We really appreciate how you steered this ship up until the end. Let us give her a round of applause. To all of you, academics, colleagues, students, external community members who came here to honor this event. You left your busy schedule. I know we are approaching exam, so there's a lot of preparation, but you took your time to come here to listen to the discussions of the day. Indeed, your interest in the issues of our country, issues that affect our society, it's also appreciated. May you please give yourselves a round of applause. I will end by saying, as we conclude, let us remember that these conversations are not just academic. They are deeply connected to the lived realities of millions of South Africans. It is clear that the road ahead will require continued reflection, dialogue, and courage to face uncomfortable truths. The issues of self-determination, the role of places like Orania, and the features or the future of our country's diplomatic engagement with its diverse community, demanding an ongoing attention and action. And Dr. Mokoena, indeed, we might be at crossroads. We should remember that 49 people yesterday, they left for America. However, there are people who are still saying we are Africans and we are being defined by the beautiful landscape of our country. With those words, colleagues, thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you wouldn't say that we just hijacked Dr. Shaku. He was just meant to do the opening remarks, but you'll agree with me that he really wove everything beautifully together in his closing remarks. So please, let's thank Dr. Shaku. And this brings us to the end of our formal engagement. But I really hope that the conversation will continue, that something in you has been sparked, and as has been said, the book is available, is on sale outside. There's a speed point, so you use your phone, you use your card, all available. So it's only 260 Rand. So please make sure that you get yourself a copy, write a review, write a reflection. That's what we do in academia. And the conversation will continue also after. Dr. Mokoena will be here to continue the conversation. I know some of us are very shy to ask in front of everybody, so we can continue the conversation not only with the panel, but also amongst ourselves as well. I'm trying to move time as I'm talking, and I'm thinking what else to talk about because I was asked to kill a bit of time. We have some refreshments. We have late lunch for you. Again, to just say thank you for coming through. Thank you for the engagements with us today. We have food, which I hope is now ready. Please, please, please don't leave. If it's not ready, I promise you within the next 5 minutes, it will be ready so we can continue having conversations amongst ourselves. We don't want to be in trouble with the dean about wasteful expenditure. Ngicela nidle bandla, ngicela nidle. Siyabonga, siyabonga. This brings us to the end of our formal engagements. Thank you.